So the next version of rolling that I'm going to teach you is what I call modern rolling. It is what was taught at CEUSeminars.org as rolling. And it still uses the fifth metacarpal head, but it has a much more complicated wrist and arm movement, which makes it much harder to actually apply any real pressure and makes it really tough to actually use your legs. You really just can't. We're going to do the best we can to use bigger arm muscles and not wrist flexors and extensors to do it, but do the best you can. So what we're going to do with this one is we're going to take that fifth metacarpal head, we're going to find a muscle, we'll just use rectus spinae for now, we're going to purchase on it just like we did before, and then I'm literally going to grab my own forearm and I'm going to pull it towards me so that my wrist moves. So now my palm is pronated, and my wrist is slightly extended. I'm going to then push my forearm diagonally across so that my hand rolls, my wrist flexes, and ulnarly deviates. Because that's super simple. Then I'm going to rinse and repeat. So I'm pulling the forearm back and forward, rolling my knuckle around on her like a rolling pin. But I'm not making any of these motions by firing my forearm flexors. I'm literally thinking about pushing my elbow and forearm away, pulling it back. Your other hand can help just for getting the feeling of that direction, but it's not actually used most of the time when people do this, especially because they love to do it with both hands. Roll them like this. There is this funky, floppy hand posture that almost always ensues when you get to the end of the stroke. It's just what it is when you try to make that wrist motion, especially with a relaxed hand, you're going to end up with kind of this floppy, open fist, open hand. That's okay. We just want it to be soft enough that it can close when I come back. So I'm not slapping her with my hand on both sides. The pressure from this one is the weight of the arm only when you're trying to learn it. As you get more comfortable, you can hold your arm in shape and bend your knees to apply kind of a base amount of pressure, and then keeping the arm relaxed enough, you can still do this modern roll. But this one is much, if you thought the last one was hard, unintuitive, this one is much less intuitive for most people, because we really struggle with motions happening here that aren't being made to happen right here. Trying to get that forearm to relax and the shoulder to make the motion is the trickiest bit. Great. The reason you can't really use your legs is because that motion is just so tricky to happen. It's headed diagonally, and it's generally done faster than our other ones. It's harder to try to move the body fast enough.
And it's diagonally angled up toward the spine?
No, it can go wherever you want it to go. I can be positioned however it fits.
Okay.
This gets done a lot up here in the shoulder girdle. They do this with a seated chair work as well. You can do it a lot of places. Just a nice flat area in the back here is an easy place to learn. Hang of it. We were told you should practice this at stoplights in the car on your own thigh chair. And that's great until you're in traffic and people are looking at you like, what are you doing in the car? Maybe out of the country stop sign or something. This technique usually is done in modern Tui Na as a warm-up. The area loose and softened up a little bit, just running back over it. I would much prefer to use the other one personally to do that. I know I'm biased. I did that one for years before I learned this one. But you'll get to play with it here and see. The other one is called Shanghai rolling, and it is stupidly simple. We are literally using our ulna and forearm as a rolling pin, and we're going to be rolling it by pronating and supinating. So I like to do this if I'm going to here in the low back. I'm simply pronating my hand, applying a little downward pressure, and rolling the palm, supinating and pronating back. Is that pressure okay? For me, this one just kind of feels like more work than it's worth, usually. There are times I will do this. Honestly, the primary way I use it is for static pressure to mobilize the low back. So instead of just using this to do some techniques, I'll hold the rib cage and I'll apply pressure and roll and hold that pressure to create some space between the thorax and the pelvis on one side. And that roll helps a little bit. Mostly it's pushing with your legs and stabilizing your. One of my teachers did a two-handed version of it, but instead of actually trying to roll, you just separate your elbows and you do a little bit of a stretch of that throughout the area. That's a good technique. And not the same thing. It's like, I'm going to make up a way I can use this. About the only way that Shanghai rolling is typically used for me, in most cases, is cupping. I'm doing fire cupping. That's how I place cups, but I'm not really doing body work with it. It is often done on the legs as well, either on the low back or the legs. You just have to be aware of your hand. So if I'm working here on her thigh, I don't want to be smacking her in the bottom. Likewise, if I'm here, I've got to make sure I'm low enough in that curve of lordosis of the spine that I'm not patting people's backside. If you're up here higher in the back, you don't want to be slapping people in the back of the head. Positional awareness.
Things that could go wrong with Tui Na.
Mini massage.
When it's lower on the back, it looks more like you're purchasing with the.
It can be anywhere along the ulna. Because pressure straight on the spine doesn't feel good, it tends to be pressure more towards the elbow
Okay.
than it is out here. But depending on the person, if their spine isn't palpable, there's enough tissue that we can apply the pressure.
I use it a lot on the lower leg, and it more of this part
Higher or more distal.
and on like the tendons. Really, it seems to be helpful.
Sure.
It really flows well down here, but
There's nothing wrong with them. They just don't seem to resonate as much with me as the traditional rolling. That works.